morning, Rocky. I hope you are having a great morning this morning. My name is Billy Bonfield. I get to serve as our student pastor over at our Frederick campus, and I could not be more excited that you've chosen to be with us this morning. We have a great Sunday morning planned for you. We are finishing up our last week in the comeback series. Matt Cote, our Frederick campus pastor, he's going to be getting up. He's going to finish out that series today, and we are pumped about it. We also want to remind you that today we're also going to be taking communion. So we have about 10 minutes away. So we want to encourage you, if you don't have your communion stuff in front of you, go ahead and go grab that real quick. And the last thing I want to tell you is that even in the midst of everything going on in this world, man, God is still doing great things through our church. Man, God is doing great things through the Global Sea Church. And today we get to celebrate 3 baptisms that were filmed earlier this week. And if you are, normally here on a Sunday morning in person, what happens is when those people come up out of the water, we lose our minds and we cheer and we scream because, man, what an amazing decision that they have come to know Jesus. So this morning, I know it might be a little weird for you, but even when they come up out of the water, we want you to cheer and scream for them because of the decision that they've made. So we're going to continue, we're going to worship this morning. So I want to encourage you, man, celebrate those baptisms and worship with us this morning.
We're going to sing together. This is a song you know from your house. Let's sing, let's dance. You can stand up. You don't have to sit on the couch. Let's worship together. When I run away. When I run away, I'll never outrun your grace. Your love stays the same, and that's never gonna change. You're running, come on, sing it out. You're running out to me, you're running out to me, your arms stretched out to me. Heaven's ringing with the sound of freedom. Your love is rescued me, your love is rescued me. Heaven's singing with the song of freedom. Your love is changing me, your love is changing me. Oh, when there was no hope and I was out on my own, you welcomed me home and wrapped me back in your arms. You're running out to me, you're running out to me, your arms stretched out to me. Heaven's ringing with the sound of freedom. Your love is rescued me, your love is rescued me. Heaven's singing with the song of freedom. Your love is changing me, your love is changing me. Oh, 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 oh. Your love is changing me. Oh, 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 oh. Sing this out. How can it be? How can it be you came and saved a wretch like me? Forever in your love, you got a hold on me. Amazing grace and sweet the sound that's saving me. Forever in your love, you got a hold on me. How can it be you came and saved a wretch like me? Forever in your love, you got a hold on me. Amazing grace and sweet the sound that's saving me. Forever in your love, forever in your love. Heaven's ringing with the sound of freedom. together this morning. And I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. And man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid, 'cause I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. But you've seen them all, and you still call me friends. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. And there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who cares. Come on. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who cares. You turn clays into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who cares. You're the only one who cares. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Come on, sing it out. Better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing
So, good morning, Rocky. How amazing was that worship experience this morning? And to celebrate those baptisms today of David and Heather and Madison, I hope this morning you guys were doing what Billy said, and when they came up out of the water, you were cheering like crazy. And how awesome is it that after those baptisms, we got to sing and worship together. No better song than Graves into Gardens. Hey, this morning we are jumping in, like Billy said, to the rest of our comeback series. And Matt's going to be teaching this morning, and he's going to be teaching about Moses this morning. And before we dive into that, and as we prepare to take communion, I just want to go to a little piece of Moses' story and just kind of share the parallels between communion and the Passover. And so some of you may know the Passover story, and some of you may not know that story. But basically, Pharaoh was the king of Egypt, and Pharaoh had enslaved the Israelites, and God was going to rescue them, and he was going to use Moses to do this. And he was going to use Moses to lead them out of Egypt. And so God told Moses, he gave him these instructions. He said, go and find an unblemished lamb and sacrifice that lamb and take the blood of the lamb and paint it on the doorposts of the houses, on the top and on the sides. And then prepare a meal with that lamb and eat the entire lamb. And Moses was to go and give these instructions to the Israelites. And he did. And the Israelites, out of an act of faith, they did that. They went and they found an unblemished lamb and they sacrificed him, and they used the blood and they painted their doorposts. And that night when the angel of death came, the angel of death passed over their houses and they were spared from death. And this act was the first Passover, and it was a tradition that was to be passed on from generation to generation. And ultimately, the end of that story is that Pharaoh was frustrated with what was happening in the nation. And so he let the Israelites go, and Moses led them to freedom. Fast forward many years to Luke chapter 22. And in Luke 22, that was the night of Jesus' death, and he was preparing to have the Last Supper with his disciples, what we celebrate as communion. And so he said to his disciples, go and prepare the Passover meal. And so they went and they prepared that meal. And then Jesus sat with them that night. And he said this, he said, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover meal with you before I suffer. You see, Jesus is the Passover lamb. No sin, no blemishes. His blood forgives us of our sin. You see, God, in his grace, he gave us mercy and freedom. And God, he brought his justice on human evil, but he brought his mercy to bring a substitute. And I don't know about you guys, but that statement, I can resonate with that in my life. So many times in our life, I've made mistakes. My sin, sometimes it overcomes me. It feels heavy. But God in all of his grace, like I said before, he gives us mercy and freedom where there should have been judgment. And he gives us healing and peace where maybe our life should have been a mess. And today, as we take communion together as followers of Jesus, it just gives us an opportunity today to celebrate and to remember and to reflect the freedom that God gave through that Egyptian exodus. And as we take the bread and the juice this morning, you guys, we get to celebrate that we have been rescued through the sacrifice of Jesus. And that sacrifice, it brought freedom, and it brought love, and it brought life that we didn't deserve. So this morning, whenever you're ready, take the bread and take the juice and remember that sacrifice. Remember the freedom that we have in that sacrifice today. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and take.
the wonder of how you brought deliverance, the exodus of my heart. 'Cause you found, you freed, held back the waters from my knees. Oh, Yahweh, you're the God who fights for me, Lord of every victory. Hallelujah, hallelujah. 'Cause you have torn apart the sea, you have led me through the deep. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Cloud by day, it's a sign that you miss me. The fire by night, it's the guiding light to my feet. You found, you freed, held back the waters from my release. Oh, Yahweh, sing it out. You're the God who fights for me, Lord of every victory. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You have torn apart the sea, you have led me through the deep. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You're the God. You're the God who fights for me, Lord of every victory. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You have torn apart the sea, you have led me through the deep. Hallelujah, hallelujah. This morning we sing in joy. God is good. Come on. 1, 2. We walk this out. Listen. You stepped into my Egypt. You took me out of it. You marched me out in freedom into the promised land. Now I will not forget you, God. I've seen all you've done. This swallowed up forever by the fury of your love. You stepped into my Egypt, and you took me by the hand. You marched me out in freedom into the promised land. Now I will not forget you, God. I've seen all you've done. Death is swallowed up forever by the fury of your love. You're the God who fights for me, Lord of every victory. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing it out. You have torn apart the sea, you have led me through the deep. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Amen.
Awesome. Good morning. Hey, church, I hope you're doing well. Wherever you are checking in with us this morning in probably your living rooms, it's good to have you. We are right in the midst, actually coming to the end of our comeback series. So again, we're just glad you're here for week 4. Before we jump into the message, I just want to do something off the cuff a little bit. I want to invite Billy Bonfield up on the stage just real quick. He didn't know I was doing this, but Billy is the one who opened up the services this morning and did a great job, made his streaming debut. Yeah, did a great job. And if you don't know Billy, again, he's one of our student pastors on staff here, serves primarily at the Fred campus. Been on staff for
3.5 years.
3.5 years, done an incredible job. And I was so excited when we brought this guy in because
I was just a couple of months away from our oldest going into student ministry.
Yeah.
And I've got two of my girls in your student ministry, and you do a great job.
Oh, thanks,
And a shout out just to all the small group leaders out
Yeah.
there too. Man, you guys are rock stars. Thanks so much for everything that you do. And I know we're in this season of Corona, but here's the thing. Life keeps happening,
Yeah,
doesn't
it does. It
and
does.
Billy, first of all, it's your anniversary today.
Today is my,
So
5
what's up,
years.
Jessica? Good. We love you guys. 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years. So tell us everything that you've learned about being a good husband.
Oh,
Just
man.
kidding. Don't do
Oh,
that. Okay, now here's the other thing. Not only is your anniversary day, but you've had some big news come out the last couple
Yeah,
of
that's
months.
right. Yeah.
Tell everybody.
okay, do you want me to
Tell
tell?
everybody.
So this will be our last anniversary that we celebrate alone. Jessica and
Oh.
I are expecting our first in September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little girl.
Little girl.
Girl dad.
Yeah, girl dad.
Ah, all right.
That's right.
I know something about that. Okay,
Yeah,
so Adley Joe
Yeah.
is the name.
Is the name.
And I'm not sure if I was supposed to say that to thousands of people, but I did it anyways. But we're super excited for you guys. I
Thanks,
just wanted
man.
to let you
Appreciate
know
it.
we love you. And so here's what I want to do. I just want to take 30 seconds to pray for you, pray for Jessica, pray for this little one, and pray for all the folks out there that are going, that life keeps happening, right? Things are happening.
For sure.
And I did a wedding a couple weeks ago.
Man,
Things
that's
are
awesome.
happening. Life keeps moving forward. But one, dude, we love you. We're
you.
glad you're here.
Appreciate it.
And Jessica, we love you too, wherever you're watching. And we want to pray for Adley Joe this morning, and for all the families out there that maybe over the next couple of months, some baby's going to be coming.
For sure.
I have a feeling in 9 months, a lot of babies coming. All right. So,
Yeah,
anyways,
that's
let me just pray for you real quick. God, we love you, and I'm so thankful for everything you're doing in and through this church. And I love this church. I love the people that you have drawn to this church. I'm so thankful for the guys and girls that I get to lead beside and to lead with. And man, what a great leadership team we have. And I'm so thankful for Billy over the last 3 years, just for his influence, not just in our church at the Fred campus, for the influence he's had in my girls. And God, I just pray for him and for Jessica this morning. What a great day, a 5-year anniversary. Just the incredible journey that you have had them on. I'm so thankful that I included a move out to Colorado. God, this morning we also pray for little Adley Joe. And we are so excited for her arrival later this fall. God, I pray. I just believe even right now you are forming her. You are knitting her together. And God, we are praying for a healthy little baby girl here in a couple of months. And we cannot wait to see her and to hold her. And I pray that during this time, what a tough time, even just some of the tension I know Billy has felt, not being able to go to some of these doctor visits. I pray that you will be close to them, that you will calm any fears or anxieties in light of Jessica being pregnant during this season. And man, we just can't wait to celebrate the addition to this family. We also pray for those who are in very similar places, ladies who are pregnant and just dealing with the tension of this season. And again, God, we pray that you'll be close to them. So we love you, and we thank you for Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen. Hey, give Billy some love wherever you're watching in the comments today, dude.
man.
We love you.
Appreciate it.
People would be clapping right now, but there's nobody here.
Thank
So
you,
yeah,
everybody.
all right,
Yeah,
okay.
thanks.
Good, all right. 2 people clapping in here. It's great. Anyways, we are, again, glad that you're here this morning in week 4 of the Comeback series. And I also just want to remind you, this Thursday, we've got a night of worship. It's going to be happening at 6:30. You can check in for that. And just one last thing. I keep failing to launch in the message this morning. But also just want to say thank you to all of our partners who have been consistent in their generosity over the last 6-7 weeks through this season of streaming our services online. And man, that's been encouraging for us as leadership and giving us the opportunity to serve and love people well during this crazy season. So thanks so much. Let's continue to be consistent in that as we keep moving forward. But here we are in week 4, and what we've done over the last couple of weeks, we've been checking in with some biblical characters and walking through their stories. And here's what we've seen. That there's everybody, we have this in common, that we've all had a moment in our life or a moment in our story where things were less than ideal. We find ourselves in circumstances that are pretty difficult, and over and over and over again, we have seen through these stories the last 3 weeks that these folks, they kind of weather the storm, they get through it, and then they end up better on the other side, and that's why we call it a comeback. It's a comeback because the odds were against them, all right? It's a comeback because, if there was 2 teams playing, they were the team that didn't have
have as many points. They were a little bit behind, but we have seen how God is able to redeem and restore and repair that narrative in their life. He's with them through their most difficult circumstances. And so today we're going to do that as we jump in and we look at the story of Moses. Now, Moses has a pretty incredible comeback story. It's so incredible that probably after Jesus, Moses, he just might be one of the most well-known biblical characters. I mean, most of you watching have heard the name Moses. Most of you know that kind of most of the story of Moses. Even if you didn't grow up in church, you have heard the story of Moses. In fact, he's so famous. He's like an Old Testament celebrity. He's so famous. He's got movies, okay? You've probably seen movies of him. And the first picture here, I mean, he was even made into a cartoon movie. And I'm telling you, if somebody makes a cartoon movie about you, you're famous, all right? That's when you know you've made it, when you get drawn into a cartoon. And some of you may know this one. This is Charlton Heston, Moses. Now, you know this one. You older folks, you know this one. We're talking about old people today. We love you. We're glad you're here. But Charlton Heston, I mean, the Ten Commandments came out in 1956. I mean, the story of Moses has been around for a while. You know, when the Ten Commandments was made, it cost them $13 million to make this. And in the opening box office weekend, its initial release, the Ten Commandments, the story of Moses, made $122 million. Again, that's back in 1956. It's a popular story, and you probably have heard the name Moses. And his story, it gets some serious play, gets some serious attention because his comeback story is pretty epic. And we love to celebrate great comeback stories. We love it. And, you know, we love old people too. So it's just got everything in this story. So we're just calling this comeback story this morning, the old guy comeback. Now look at this. Deuteronomy chapter 34 in verse 7 says this. This is how old he was. It says, Moses was 120 years old when he died. 120 when he passed away. Yet, and I love that the scriptures say this, yet his eyes were not weak. He still had good vision, nor his strength was gone. So he was doing pretty well still. Pretty fit guy for 120. And if you could kind of look at the story of Moses, if you could look at his life, you could kind of divide it up into three parts, each part being 40 years long. So that's what I'm going to do just this morning real quick. Just quickly go through his story a little bit and then draw attention and hopefully draw some encouragement for you and for me. So his first 40, he had a pretty good life. Now, it starts out with a little bit of tension. Moses is actually a Hebrew. He's an Israelite. He's going to be born into some really strange and unique circumstances. In fact, the season of life when Moses is born, the Israelites they're slaves in Egypt. Pharaoh is not a big fan of the Hebrews, and he actually makes a decree, creates an order where he has all of these Hebrew sons murdered. There's this kind of image of these male babies being thrown into the Nile. And Moses' mother, who obviously loves her child, is unwilling to do that. And she kind of like runs and hides, and she gets a basket, puts Moses in it. And so while there are other, just again, a horrible story, horrible season, while there are other babies that are drowning in this river, Moses is floating down. And he eventually he kind of like floats into this Egyptian palace, and Pharaoh's daughter finds him, and he is essentially kind of adopted into Pharaoh's family. Just an incredible story. And he is raised in the palace. He's actually a prince of Egypt. And so this is kind of like his first 40 years. Now, as he gets older, he begins to wrestle with the tension as he knows that he is a Hebrew, and he is seeing Pharaoh and his leadership kind of keeping his people in captivity. And there's this one moment in his story where anger begins to rise, and he sees this Egyptian soldier who's beating this Israelite, and he kind of freaks out and goes after the Egyptian soldier, kills him, hides him, buries him in the sand, and then he flees, and he runs. And he ends up out in this desert. And so he ends up being a shepherd out in the field and marrying a girl and working for his father-in-law. So this kind of makes up his first 40. Just as a huge shift in his life from being a prince to just being in the middle of nowhere. He's in the middle of nowhere.
He had this thing, he really had everything to his advantage, could have lived any kind of life he wanted to, but again, dealing with that tension of being a Hebrew in the palace of Pharaoh, he ends up making a poor choice. He murders an Egyptian and he flees. In his second 40 years, he's out in the middle of nowhere. He's just out there and he's kind of running away from his past. He marries this lady and begins to work for his father-in-law. Now he's a shepherd out essentially in the middle of the desert. And one day when he's out there, again, now he's well into the middle stage of his life, the second 40. There's a part of his story where he's shepherding and he sees this bush that is burning. And for most of you probably have heard this story, the burning bush story, but there's a bush that's burning and Moses sees it. And it's kind of interesting because the bush isn't burning up. And so Moses goes to see what's happening, and when he approaches the bush starts talking to him. And if you were there with Moses, you would freak out. And Moses did too a little bit, and he begins to interact with this burning bush. And God is in this bush, and he begins to say to Moses, listen, I've got a plan for you. There's a comeback story that's brewing here. This is not where you're going to end your life out here in the middle of nowhere in this desert watching sheep. I'm going to call you to something different. And God begins to lay out the plan for what Moses is going to be called to do, to go and to lead and to free the Israelites from the captivity of Pharaoh. Again, this is kind of the beginning of the comeback story. Moses is probably close to 80 right now. 80 years old. And so there's this old guy comeback story brewing. Now, this is what's interesting in Exodus chapter 3, verse 11. Notice how Moses begins to react. And this is what we usually do for those of us who have been in a situation where we have felt lost, we have felt, we've made some poor mistakes, we're out here in the middle of nowhere, and then there's an opportunity that arises, and sometimes we begin to think of why we aren't the person for the job, or a bunch of excuses of why our comeback story could never happen. This is exactly what Moses does. This is Exodus chapter 3, verse 11. So Moses begins to engage in a conversation, and it says this, but Moses said to God, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He doesn't initially respond by going, game on, I'm so excited, I've been bored out here in this desert. He goes, God, I don't know if you know who I am. Are you sure you want me? You must not know me. If you knew my story, listen, I'm the guy who 40 years ago was in Egypt. I don't know if you knew that, but I was in Egypt, and I was actually a prince, and I killed a guy. I don't think they would exactly be welcoming me back. And so I don't know if you want me. The reason why I'm out here is to get away from all of that. And Moses, this is kind of his tension where he's going, I'm not perfect. And I would remind us this morning, neither are we. Moses wasn't perfect, and he made mistakes, and you and I were not perfect, and we've made some mistakes. But here's the key in the story, especially the comeback story of Moses. But Moses was available. He was available, and God had a plan. Moses was available, and God had a plan. Moses was in the middle of nowhere with nothing going on, and God shows up, and he goes, I have a plan. And you might feel this morning that right now in your life, you're in the middle of nowhere. You might be thinking this morning, God doesn't even know where I am. My life's pretty dark. I walked away from God a long time ago, and I couldn't even tell you where he is. I don't really have a plan for my life. I'm just kind of going day by day. I'm out here all by myself. And some of you this morning, you could own it, that you're in the season of your life because you've made a poor choice. Maybe you've made one too many poor choices. You've made so many poor choices that people don't even want anything to do with you. You've walked away from relationships, and now you find yourself living most of your life in the context of isolation. But I'm telling you, there's a way back. Moses has made mistakes, and he's gone out into the desert, but God has come for him, and he's coming with a comeback plan. He's coming with a comeback story. And that's the beauty of God. He pursues us whether we want him to or not. He doesn't leave us where we are. And so God comes and he finds Moses and he calls him to something better. And here's the thing. God wasn't picking Moses because he was the right guy. He was picking Moses because he was the right God. And oftentimes you and I, we try to justify why God calls us to some things and not something else. But this morning, the reminder in the story of Moses, you got to let God do the picking. God does the picking. Here's what we do. We do the surrendering and the obeying, which is really hard. God does the picking. God shows up. God calls us to something better. He redeems our story. He restores us, and He gives us something new to get after. He does the picking. Here's what we do, the surrendering and the obeying. But Moses will continue to push back. He'll continue to push back. Look at this, Exodus chapter 3, verse 13. And Moses said to God, well, suppose I go. Oh, yeah, he's going to entertain the thought. Suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is His name? Then what shall I tell them? Hey, suppose I go. What do I tell them? They're going to have all these questions. What's the plan? How's this all going to work? I'm just going to go to the Israelites and tell them we're busting out of here, and then I'm just going to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let the people go, and he's going to do it. What's the plan? Tell me the plan. Tell me how this is going to work. I'm not going to step into this comeback story until I know how it's going to end. And friends, that's just not how it works. Again, our call is to be obedient and to surrender, to take the first step, and you're not going to know how everything's going to work out. God begins to lean in with Moses, and God says, well, here's what I want you to say. He gives him 3 paragraphs of things. When you go to Israelites, I want you to say this. And when you go to Pharaoh, I want you to say this. And again, Moses pushes back. Look, Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. And Moses answered, well, what if? You got to love what if questions. What if? Well, what if they don't believe me or listen to me and say, no, the Lord did not appear to you? What if? Okay, I hear you, God, I'm going to go and say these things, but what if they don't listen? And then God does his staff and snake trick and shows Moses his power and how all things are possible. But again, Moses pushes back. Exodus chapter 4, verse 10. And Moses said to the Lord, look, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. Moses keeps coming back. He goes, well, what's the plan, God? And he goes, well, what if it doesn't work? And then he gets into his own qualities as a leader. He goes, you don't want me. I can't even talk well. This whole thing, your whole plan is to go and to talk to the Israelites and Pharaoh, and I stutter, and I have a slur in my speech. You don't want me. You don't want me. I can't do this. I'm not good at talking. And then God responds, verse 12. He goes, no, go. I'm going to help you. I'll help you speak. And I'll teach you what to say. And then Exodus 4:13, this kind of sums up this little conversation. But Moses says back to God, well, pardon your servant, Lord. And this is his bottom line. Please send someone else. Don't pick me. Send somebody else. Man, I'm running away from something. I don't know if I want to run to something now. Please send somebody else. Send somebody else who's more qualified. Send somebody else who can handle this plan better. Just send somebody else. And here's what I know, that sometimes when you start thinking about a comeback, you start looking at the scoreboard. You start looking at what's going to be needed or what's going to be required for the comeback to be successful, and you start reminding yourself how far behind you are. And you start reminding yourself how far you've let yourself go. You start reminding yourself of all the poor choices in your past. 7 years ago, I was in the midst of my own comeback story. I was living in the state of Arkansas, which I would compare to the desert where Moses is. And if you're from Arkansas, I'm sorry. They're great people, but it's just not for me. But anyways, I was in the middle of Arkansas, and I was in the middle of this church planting story that was kind of coming to an end. It had taken a 2.5 years worth of leading, and we were getting to the end of it. I was in the middle of Arkansas, and the church plant was coming to an end. And I'm telling you, friends, that you know if you're alive, you've had these moments in your life where you feel like the whole world is crumbling in on you. And there was moments in Arkansas, I can remember just pacing in my living room. If you're at the Fred campus, I've told this story before. I was just pacing in the living room. I didn't know at the time, but I was just having these anxiety attacks. Just the weight of everything that was happening, knowing that this church plant was leading not towards success, but towards failure. And I remember having meetings, getting up early and having Zoom meetings with my team and with our leadership, and then going into the kitchen after these meetings in the morning and looking at my wife and going, I don't think I can do anything right. I feel like everything that I touch right now is just crumbling. Everything that I'm trying to lead is just falling apart. And eventually the church plant would fail. We would shut it down. And I tell you what, I felt alone. I remember thinking, nobody's ever going to want to hire me now in the context of the local church. Who'd want me? I just led this journey of 2.5 years with lots of people, with hundreds of donors, and it failed. And I remember getting on, all the websites to look for jobs, and I'll just be honest, I wasn't looking at many jobs at other churches because I felt like I could no longer be of use. And I was looking at all these other kind of jobs. And listen, we've all had these moments in our life when things start crumbling in. We got it in common. When life is dark, when you're running away. Some of you have experienced the darkness of financial debt or the narrative of a loss of a loved one, or you received a diagnosis, or you're working through an addiction, or there's circumstances you didn't ask for, or there's things that you can't control, and you don't know what to do, and there's this thing that has this grip on your life that you've been running from. And you need God to intervene for you. You need a new beginning. You need to start a comeback story, and you are looking for God. And you're feeling like, man, we're just down by a lot. Matt, and this morning you're going, Matt, I hear you, but man, if you knew the scoreboard, what it looked like in the context of our marriage, it's going to take a miracle for a comeback. If you knew the scoreboard for my business, or if you knew the scoreboard in the context of my mental health, listen, if you knew the scoreboard of my brokenness and all the mistakes that are in my past, I don't know if a comeback story is even possible. And this morning, I think we kind of respond a lot like Moses, and we start going to God, listen, God, you got the wrong guy. You got the wrong marriage. You got the wrong business. You got the wrong person. It's not going to happen. I'm too far gone. I did this thing too many times, and I burnt too many bridges. Nobody's ever wanting to see me come back from this. And God says to Moses, and God says to you this morning, whoa, hang on a sec. I don't know if you know who you're talking to. I'm the God who has created all things. I'm the one in charge. I'm the one who has all the power. And it's because of God that a comeback story is possible in your life, and it was possible in the story of Moses' life because God is all powerful. He has the power to change your story in a second. In a second. Things can change. God can show up in a burning bush and change your life if you would choose to be available and surrender and obey. I got to that end of that season in Arkansas, and I'll never forget it. I was staying up late at night just filling out job application after job application. I remember praying prayers to God going, I don't know what I'm going to do. We even had a date on the calendar of when the Cote household was going to run out of money. I was doing some side jobs and just trying to do what I could. I actually had to meet with my parents and said to them, hey, this date that's coming, it was only a couple of months away, this date that's coming, I'm going to be out of money. I'm going to save just enough gas that we could drive back to your house. And if it gets to that, could I live with you? Humbling conversations. Humbling. And I remember I had so many people praying for me and concerned for me, and there's just one night. This was like my desert moment in the context of this whole story of planting this church, and the church plant is over, and I remember it's like 8:30. The kids had just gone to bed. I remember filling out all of these job applications and getting angry with God and going, God, how's this going to work out? What am I going to do? Ministry is probably over for me. I don't think anybody really wants anything to do with me because my resume now has a failed church plant that has just, wounded so many people and caused so much hurt and so much pain. And I'll never forget it. I got a text. From a guy in our church. He's actually in just about 5 minutes going to sing a song. His name's Nick Carver. I got a text from Nick Carver. And it just said, hey, are you looking for a job? And I went from one of the darkest moments probably in my life to breathing again for the first time. And it just happened in a turn of a text. And I said, yeah, I am. This church plant, nobody knows this yet, but this church plant isn't going to work out. And yeah, I am looking for the next thing. I am looking for the next thing. And he says, man, I just thought about you because we've had some job openings here at Rocky. Can I give your number to our lead pastor, Sean? Could he give you a call? And I said, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And if you're thinking right now, are you comparing Nick Carver to a burning bush in Moses' story? I am. Yeah. Nick Carver is my burning bush. He showed up. God used him in an incredible way into my life. And one of the reasons why I'm on this stage this morning teaching to you, and you're watching from your living rooms, because 7 years ago, God showed up through a text, through a friend. And through that text was the beginning of a comeback story in my life where God said, man, I'm not done with you. Let's go. And I'm telling you, my first 2 years here at Rocky, I spent so much time with Chris Crisfield, the guy who used to be on our staff, because I had to work through this sense of not feeling worthy, of feeling like a failure. That I had messed up and I had nothing to offer. And it took some time. It took some time, but here's what I've seen. That if you believe in Jesus this morning, and if you believe in the story of Easter, we can trust and we can surrender our past to him. If Jesus is who he says he is, if he's the guy who showed up on this earth, who proclaimed, got himself killed because he told everybody that he was the Son of God and could forgive your sins and forgive my sins, who would die, and then even before his death, prophesied that 3 days later he would come back from the dead, and he did it, then you and I can trust him in our desert moments. You're not too far gone. You didn't make too many mistakes, because our God is the God of the comeback. And you got to hear that this morning. You're worth it. Jesus on a cross 2,000 years ago communicated to you in the loudest voice possible up on the cross. You're worth it. Matt, you're worth it. I see your screw-ups. I see your failures. I see you hiding in the dark, but I'm coming for you because that's what I do. Moses, I see you. I know you can't talk well. I know you're running from your past, but I'm going to call you to something bigger and to something better. And the beautiful part of the story of Moses is that he will step into the plans that God has for him. And just a couple of chapters later, millions of Israelites will be walking out of slavery in Egypt. Was it always easy? No. Will Moses always get it right? No. God was with him. And Moses surrendered. And Moses obeyed. Moses made himself available. And God had a plan. If you're in need of a comeback this morning because of the mistakes that you have made, you got to hear God's voice this morning. You're worth it. And he's coming for you. You just make yourself available. You obey. And you surrender. I'll end with this and then I'll pray. Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 10. You see the culmination of the story of Moses. It says, since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Friends, you don't have to have it all together. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to know that there's a God who sees you right where you are. Let God do the picking. Let him pick your comeback story. You do the surrendering. You do the obeying. God's saying it's not too late. You're not too far. And you can restart your story right wherever you are. The darkest, most desolate place in your life. For some of you this morning, you need to pray a prayer like this. God, my life is dark, and I can't see you, I don't hear you, but I'm going to praise you anyways. I'm going to trust, I'm going to surrender, I'm going to obey in this really tough season because I know that you are good, because I know that you have found me, because I know you have the power to free me, and I know that you are fighting for me. It's our prayer this morning. Our God is the God of the comeback, and you are worth it because Jesus says so. Let me pray for you. Father, this morning, we thank you for a story of a guy thousands of years ago who messed up, who ran away, and yet you found him, and you freed him, and you joined him and called him into this incredible story where he was fighting and leading your people out of slavery into the promised land. You were with him in the mess. You were with him in the tension. And I pray for those this morning who find themselves in a desert place, who can look back into their past and go, man, I've screwed it up. Who have been running and hiding and finding themselves in a dark place. And I pray this morning that you would remind them that you are close. You can't help yourself, but to come find us and to offer us and refresh us with something anew. And I pray that we would receive it this morning. That we wouldn't make all these excuses and the what ifs or how's this going to work out or I don't have what it takes, but instead to trust you with our comeback story. To step into it one day at a time. To surrender and to obey where you lead us and trust that you will do for us what we can't do for ourselves. Free some people up this morning with the truth of your gospel. You are alive and well, and all things are possible. Father, we love you. We thank you for Jesus. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
You're the God who fights for me, for the very victory. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You have torn apart the sea, you have led me through the deep. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing it.
throughout this week. Have a great one, and we'll see you next time. Take care.